Hello and welcome to another episode of Analog Insights. In today's episode, my friend Greg and I review the Leicaflex SL2, which is arguably the best 35mm single lens reflex camera that Leica ever built. The camera operates fully mechanical, comes with a built-in light meter, and was built to the highest quality standards. So high that Lights, the company behind it, actually lost money on every single camera that it sold, betting on selling lenses along with it in order to turn the overall sale into a profit. And that, of course, was also the reason why it was only sold for a very short time frame, for 2 years between 1974 and 1976, until it was replaced by its successor, the Leica R3. In that short time frame, it still sold 24,500 SL2s, according to many sources online. In order to test the camera properly, we went out on a photo walk at the Würzburg residence and the Martin von Wagner Museum, shooting some AGFA APX 100 outdoors and some Kodak Tri-X indoors. Let's take a closer look at the photos, the camera itself, and our findings. So as always, let's get some historical context first. The camera manufacturer Leitz, which later became Leica Camera AG, was traditionally known for the Oscar Barnack rangefinders, and ever since 1953 for the legendary M rangefinders, with the M standing for the German word Messsucher. These were highly regarded by both professionals and amateurs, but at the same time the camera market slowly moved towards single lens reflex cameras, and Leitz was really slow to adapt to this trend. So it took until 1964 until Leitz finally released the Leicaflex, which already kind of lagged behind the competition from the start. So critics were quick to point out, for instance, that it didn't come with any kind of TDL metering, so through the lens metering, and yet cost quite some money, so it had quite a high price point, which could only be justified, or primarily be justified, by the amazing lenses that it came with. And already back then, Leitz was known for incredible lens quality. But it then took until 1968 until Leitz really addressed the issues pointed out by critics and introduced the Leicaflex SL, with SL standing for selective light, which was Leitz's version of a TTL, a through the lens metering implementation. That made things better, of course, but didn't really solve the problem completely. They then also briefly introduced the Leicaflex SL mod, which was a variant, so to speak, of the Leicaflex SL that supported a motor drive, so an automatic winder. And then finally they got to the Leicaflex SL2 that we talk about here today, which is considered the pinnacle of the entire series. And what is interesting here is that almost simultaneously, Leitz had started to cooperate with the Japanese camera manufacturer Minolta in order to gain much more knowledge when it came to electronics and to things like automatic modes, aperture priority modes, and so forth. So they kind of simultaneously in parallel worked on which later became the Leica R3, which was introduced in 1976 and which replaced the Leicaflex SL2. And if you're interested in that story, take a look at our video about the Minolta XE and the Leica R3 here on the channel as well. what about the features of the Leicaflex SL2? The camera comes in two different colors, a regular chrome and a black chrome. The shutter is really interesting because it's a completely mechanically timed, horizontally moving, rubberized cloth shutter with speeds ranging from 1 second all the way up to 1/2000th of a second, plus a bulb mode that can all be easily controlled with your index finger, even if you have the camera at eye level, thanks to a huge and easy to operate dial on the top plate. The ISO setting ranges from ISO 12 to 3200 and can also be operated with a dedicated dial on the other side of the top plate. So these are really, really nice and I enjoyed using them. The viewfinder lets you see both the selected aperture and the currently selected shutter speed inside the viewfinder at the very bottom, which makes it really convenient to shoot this camera because you can really keep it at eye level and then use your index finger in order to change the shutter speed, or your other hand in order to change the aperture on the lens itself. Conveniently, all then you have to do in order to activate the light meter is to put your thumb underneath the film advance. That activates it and then brings in a second needle inside the viewfinder. So what you always have there is a little kind of pointer area, an outline area. And then once you have activated the light meter, you see an additional needle, and all you need to do is, of course, to center the needle, so to create an overlap between that outline pointer and the needle itself in order to get correct exposure. Interestingly, here the light meter works more like a spot meter, or it can be best compared to a spot meter, with the reading being taken from the microprism focusing spot in the center of the viewfinder. So if you need to take a reading in a shadowy area, for instance, or underneath a person's chin when you shoot portraits and some Kodak portrait, for instance, that you would like to overexpose, you can easily do that with this camera because you kind of have the spot meter built in, and then read which settings you would need, adjust the camera accordingly, reframe, and just take your shot in order to get the intended effect of metering for the shadows here. The SL2 also comes with a hot showing, which is a contrast to the earlier versions, and it flash syncs at 1/100th of a second, so slightly faster than the 1/60th of a second, which was more common at the time. It also features a full focusing view screen composed of a coarse microprism, microprisms, and a split image focusing tool in the central area, and fine microprisms on the rest of the screen. Both the viewfinder illumination and the light meter itself are driven by one battery each, and what is interesting here is that, of course, the original mercury batteries that the camera used are not available anymore, but you can simply purchase an adapter and attach that to the LR44 batteries that are more common by now, or the most common ones by now, in order to get the correct voltage to operate the light meter correctly, and these additional adapters can be easily purchased online. The camera comes without any mirror lockup feature, but it has a beautifully designed aperture stop-down lever on the front, and there's also a self-timer, which was also very common at the time for these cameras. Now to the interesting part. The camera is rather big and weighs 770 grams without a lens. And while this is of course unusually heavy, it is also a testament to the high quality and to the kind of materials, metals and other alloys that went into this camera. So the production standard has never reached such a high level, in my opinion, in any Leica camera that was produced later, especially not any kind of single lens reflex camera coming from Leica. And this is also the reason why you can really say, if you purchase an SL2 today, and it has been taken care of nicely, you can bet on it to last a couple more years, or many, many more years to come. So what about the lenses of the Leicaflex SL2? In general, as most of you will probably know, Leica lenses are considered to be among the best out there. And this also holds true for the manual focus Leica R-mount lenses. And the only reason why they are cheaper used today is that the Leica R system was discontinued, while the Leica M system and the M-mount lenses can still be used on digital cameras here today. But the quality of a Summicron, a 50mm Summicron R-mount lens is exactly as good as a 50mm M-mount would be. So you do have a great quality, but please note that in the course of the R-mount lens tradition, there were several iterations of the so-called cams, which is the mechanism that transmits the information about the aperture to the body, and then later on, of course, there's other forms of communication between the body and the lens. And here with the introduction of the Leicaflex SL2, we saw a so-called two-cam specification, which basically means two inclined curves are responsible inside the lens of transmitting the information about the aperture to the body. And it's just important to look for two-cam or three-cam specification versions of the Leica R-mount lenses, but this is usually not a problem because most of them were updated at some point in time by the owners. Another thing that is important to mention is that because of the modified mirror mechanism of the SL2, the camera accepted new wide-angle lenses that were specifically created afterwards and that protruded at the back and would otherwise with earlier versions interfere with the mirror, but now it was not a problem anymore. So you see extreme wide-angle lenses like a 16mm f2.8 fisheye Elmarit-R, a 19mm f2.8 Elmarit-R, and the 24mm f2.8 Elmarit-R, which all work great with the Leicaflex SL2. So what about our personal impressions? It is really convenient that all the information that you could potentially need about the aperture and the shutter speed and also the correct exposure are displayed inside the viewfinder. So you can basically keep the camera at eye level and fine-tune your exposure by using your index finger and change the shutter speed, which really works nicely on that huge shutter speed dial, or use your other hand in order to operate the aperture on the lens itself. And in addition to that, I also like that inside the viewfinder I don't have to just focus with the central area, but it can also kind of fine-tune my focus if I focus on something that is not in the center by just looking at it, and kind of take advantage of the microprisms that are located in the rest of the screen. Probably what surprised me most is that I was pretty concerned about the weight at first. But then picking up the camera and holding it for quite some time and shooting it, I actually started to appreciate the heftiness and the solid grip you get because it's a bit larger and because it's really heavy in your hands. So it feels much more like a Leica M, a solid feel to it. And you can also see that because of the additional space that's inside the camera in comparison to Olympus OM1, for instance, or also a Pentax MX, for instance, you just have more space in there. So even for dampening the mirror when it flips up and things like that, there is more space for that. And of course, that kind of adds to the solid overall feel of this camera. What I personally found most striking is the shutter sound. It basically made me fall in love every single time I heard that shutter and we were shooting a frame. What a sound. It's just beautiful, and I can highly recommend, both Greg and I can highly recommend everyone taking a look at this camera and trying it out at least once. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and our review of the Leicaflex SL2. If you did, please remember to like this video and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you soon. Bye.